it did come from us wanting people who were known, who is a phrase like move the needle, like like somebody like, oh my God, you've got Sam Rockwell on your show, that kind of thing. And it also came from relationships, like Vince and Peter Billingsley had a relationship. They knew Sam really well. They'd worked with Justin Long before. Vince was with Justin Long in the Dodgeball movie, and things like that. So I mean, we thought they would be great, and then we went to them and they agreed to do it, And then with Laura Dern was a thing where we were still kind of figuring out who the character was while we were writing that first season, and we just had a whole big we have a great casting director named Julie Ashton, who like would come up with these lists of like, here are all the people who are around, and it'll be this list of like everybody and every single amazing actor in the world, and I'd be like, oh my God, this is incredible. But we said yes, like we just basically sent out like feelers to all these people, and we didn't hear anything for a while. But then we got a call from Julie saying, well, Laura Dern just read the script, she read it on an airplane or something, and she really liked it, she's interested. And we were like, oh my God, Laura Dern, so then we were so thrilled to get her. And then we also filled it out with some people who I'd heard of or who I'd known of, like Kevin Michael Richardson, who plays Rosie, is a friend of mine who I'd worked with before on many other things, including The Simpsons and the PJs, and a show going all the way back to the beginning of my career called Homeboys in Outer Space, that he was one of the stars of. I always wanted him for that part of Rosie. Phil Hendry is an amazing actor who I knew from listening to him on the radio. He had this amazing comedy radio show. And then Mo Collins from Mad TV, I knew was like someone who I knew for it, as many as we had people who were like Sam, who were so unique, or Justin, who were so unique, we needed to have like our utility players, like our version. Like Mo is kind of like our version of Hank Azaria, or who can play 17 different characters. And the same goes for Trevor Duvall, who's an amazing actor who I'd worked with I'd done some Lego Star Wars shows for Lucasfilm. And Trevor was based in Canada at the time, but he played a lot of parts than that. He played the Emperor and Admiral Akbar and things like that. And he was incredibly versatile. And so he would just moved to LA. And so I brought him in. I knew that he could just do like a dozen voices, So, and then we found our kids with Debbie Derryberry, who's like an incredible pro veteran from every show you've ever heard of, incredible. And then Haley Reinhart, who plays Bill, was just a discovery where we were sort of like figuring out who can we get to play this boy. And we heard a lot of different people, and then nothing really quite like, they're all okay, And then we got this tape, and it was Haley had auditioned for like a Peanuts, I think maybe the Peanuts feature film they made a few years ago that was animated. And it was her reading one of the Charlie Brown monologues from the Charlie Brown Christmas in that voice of hers. And we were both like, me and Peter Billingsley were like, oh my God, who is this? This is incredible. Like, well, she's a singer. She's a singer from American Idol, Haley been American Idol. And she came in the next day and she was just whatever, beautiful young woman, but she had this voice, like this kind of rough, gravelly voice that was just so perfect for us. And she hadn't really acted much, but we helped her along and like helped her out. And over the course of these 5 seasons, she's just grown into like just one of the best actors on the show.
So what is your approach when filling out your writer's room?
I've only ever had to hire a writing staff for one show, which is F is for Family. So, and Bill Burr makes a joke about this. I just saw him. He was on Jimmy Kimmel last night, but he made a joke about it. But it's true is that when we met people, there were some people that I knew already, like David Richardson, who I'd worked with before. And I knew Tom Jonas a little bit, and I knew that he had a really funny, odd sense of humor. But a lot of the people that we met early on, we would ask them, like, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what was your childhood like? And in addition to reading their material and reading their sample material. But I remember Emily coming in, who was really funny and really great. And she talked about like, oh, my mom and dad were divorced. And I was raised by my dad, and he was a little crazy, and we would do these weird things. And like, and she told the story that made it into the show that first season, where she and her buddies were left to their own devices, like kids were, and they took a bunch of plastic sheeting from somewhere and made like a slip and slide, and with a hose, And then they did it, and then that's what happened in the show to Maureen happened to Emily, where like she slid like out over the thing into the street and almost got hit by a car. So that kind of stuff. If you had an interesting childhood like that, or you had a weird childhood or a messed up childhood, we wanted you. You know, if Bill always says like if the writers say like, oh, I had a great time, like no problem, my parents got along great. Like they're like, okay, well, thanks very much. So it helped to have people with a odd point of view. Like two of the other writers who came in the second season are a great team, Eric Goldberg and Peter Tibbles, and they had a very unusual thing too. Eric's dad was kind of like a small time possible, had some kind of crime connections, whatever, you know, and like there was, you know, that kind of stuff, you know. So it was fun to have that kind of like a little bit of grit, the grit that makes the pearl, you know, in the people's lives.
I mean, that's super specific to F is for Family, but do you think that should apply to some degree for most shows, that you do have this interesting background that you're coming from?
I think that helps. I think that, I mean, maybe a little bit of my, I don't know if the word is bias or whatever. Like I know people say like the cliche is like, oh, the Simpsons writers are all went to the Harvard Lampoon, and you know, and a lot of them did, and they're all really funny and they're all really great. But I didn't, you know, so I grew up in Jersey, and my dad was worked for a construction company, and I went to a small college, and then I was going to be a theater person, and I did theater in graduate school. And then after that, I taught in a high school where I was the worst teacher of a high school ever. And it was debilitatingly depressing. And then in between that, when I first moved out here, before I was able to get work doing this, I did every kind of demeaning survival job you could imagine, like working in a phone banks, and I dressed up like Santa Claus, and I dressed up like the Easter Bunny for money, and then I was a taxi cab driver in West Hollywood. And so I think that's the kind of stuff, like life experience, that does help shape you, shape your sense of humor, shape you as a writer and as a creator. So I always fun to see someone has an interesting story like that.
Across your whole career, you've had a number of times where you welcomed a new writer onto an existing writing team. What is your process there for kind of like being the ambassador to getting them up to speed, to making sure that they are caught up with, you know, the rules of the show, or making sure that they get all the correct direction for finding the right tone of the show?
There wasn't any kind of formal thing. I mean, so for the second season, we added a few new people. We added Eric and Peter Tibbles and Greenberg. We added Valerie Vaughn, and then we added Mark Wilmore, who I'd also known from working on the PJs and the Simpsons, who was just one of the, I mean, I'll just stop for a second to say, like, just this past year, both David Richardson and Mark passed away while we were finishing up season 5. So just a huge loss for all of us. But anyone who was new, like, luckily the show existed on Netflix at all times, you know, so they could just watch it. And then there was never like a written Bible or anything. If people ask, like, oh, is there a Bible for your show? I mean, I guess the Bible is sort of like my head, you know, like I have a very good memory for things. So I'll say, oh, that was in episode 203 or whatever, that kind of thing. So it would mostly be like the way we would run the room, the way we would talk, and, you know, and there was maybe a little bit of a learning curve of like people saying something and I say, well, actually we did that last year, or, you know, that kind of thing. And we added some new people for season 4. We added a great writing team of Luan Thomas and Joe Pierulli, and we added a great writer named Jessica Williamson, who came on. But then the show had been out enough time that most of them had seen it and knew it enough to like sort of figure out it wasn't that hard to jump in. We also added, also the first season was a great guy named Joe Hesslinga. And then we had like Henry Gamble moved up from writer's assistant to writer. And then he was replaced by a guy named Sam Stefanik, who then got bumped up for season 4 from writer's assistant to writer.
Talk about the fact that this is the final season, and there's got to be some level of pressure of going out the right way, like owing it to the whole show. Of course, everybody remembers the end of Game of Thrones and Sopranos for not positive reasons.
I would disagree about the Sopranos ending. I think that was absolutely brilliant. I was not into Game of Thrones, but yeah.
I just mean that, like, the
right.
mass.
It was controversial.
Yeah. So was there an extra amount of pressure to put a button on that episode? And any lessons that you learned for that?
Yeah. I mean, well, there was two kinds of pressure, because there was just the normal pressure of, well, Netflix told us. That wasn't like us saying, you know what, this is our last season. You know, Netflix, you want 8 more seasons? We're only going to do one more. No, they came to us and said, well, guess what? You're going to do one more season. So, and that was rough. And then because of timing and whatever, this last season is 8 episodes as opposed to 10 episodes, which the last 3 have been. So we only had 8 episodes now to wrap the whole show up and to get to an ending that we thought would be a satisfying conclusion to the whole story. So yeah, it was rough. It was hard at first. It took a lot of time figuring out where we're going to go. How do we want to end it? The good thing is that we learned fairly early on in the process of figuring out season 5. We knew where it was going to start, like what the beginning of it was, without spoiling anything too much, but it begins with this really terrible loss that Frank suffers. And then we knew that it would be about him dealing with that and trying to figure out what that all meant and getting some kind of answer or not. And then we knew where we wanted to end it. Like we knew where we want Frank's headspace to be at the end. And we knew more or less where we wanted, like everyone, the main characters, where we wanted their character arcs to end. So we kind of had a beginning and an end, and then it was sort of like figuring out how do we get there and making that end work. And the one thing I'll say is like the final episode is kind of like 2 episodes in one. It's a little bit longer than all the others, but not by too much. But the first part of it is this massive, gigantic, epic kind of, wow, this is the final episode kind of thing, where almost all the characters are all in one place and it's all building up to this very exciting moment and like this crucial thing, do or die for Frank and his career. And it's on Christmas Eve, and it's like, wow. And it's like huge extravaganza of all the characters, all the plots coming together, and wow, but then we knew we wanted to end it also on a smaller note with like just the family and what the family is going through and who Frank is. So of this 30-minute episode, like the first 17 minutes or so are just this epic, unbelievable, crazy thing. And then the last 12 minutes are much smaller, kind of like chamber piece about the family and about Frank and how he finds some degree of, whether or not, if he can find some kind of degree of closure and what's been going on over this last year, over these last 5 seasons of the show.